This second lecture is going to be over the uses of the Greek conjunction kai, all right? This is basically a summary. I've worked through BDAG very meticulously, word for word, every pea-picking thing. And what I have and what I'm going to present to you is a summary of all of the uses of chi in BDAG. Basically all the uses that can be used of chi in the New Testament, Septuagint, biblical literature, patristic literature, all the various uses of chi. I've actually counted 35. I have for you, I'm going to post this online, both in the full format and also the kind of a cheat sheet summary, just like Wallace does in the back of his grammar. So, it has not only just like the name of the usage, but also in brackets and italics a suggested translation for that use. So I'm going to walk through each and every pea-picking detailed way to use chi in Greek and how to understand it. It can be used kind of in two very broad ways, either as a conjunction, a marker of connections, or as an adverb, adverbially. Those are the two major categories, so to speak. It's the most frequently used particle in the New Testament, and its uses in different ways and in different circumstances from other Greek literature contributes to the distinctive style of the New Testament. So the New Testament style, because it uses chi in so many various ways, actually distinguishes it from other Greek literature, from classical period and others. The BDAG writers call it vivaciously versatile. Okay, it's far more complex. Basically, that means it's far more complex and can mean far more than merely and, right? So at an advanced level of Greek, one should be able to understand and translate appropriately the various uses of chi in biblical Greek. Okay, so as mentioned, the first overarching category is that chi is a marker of connections, generally speaking, translated and. It can connect single words. That's the first use. And under this heading, we have several various uses. In general, or generally, it means and. Jakobos kai Yosef kai Simon kai Judas, Jacob and Joseph and Simon and Judas, Matthew 13:55. So generally it's connecting, different words. It's connecting single words together. It can also connect two occurrences of the same word for emphasis, translated and. Maidzone kai maidzone, greater and greater. So it's intensifying and emphasizing kind of the more and more. This is from examples from the Shepherd of Hermas. Actually, I looked at the Greek text of the Shepherd of Hermas, and it's maidzonos kai maidzonos. But maybe BDAG was using an older Greek text of the Shepherd of Hermas. But anyways, you get the point. Another example would be eti kai eti, again and again, from the Epistle of Barnabas. With numerals, the larger number will come first if you're connecting two numbers. That would be deca kai hocto, 10 and 8. That would equal 18 from Luke 13:16. Also with numerals, it could have the meaning of or. Ace kai du'a, one or two, not one and two, but one or two. And then Samaron kai aurion, today or tomorrow, James 4:13. Also, it could be adding the whole to the part of something. So we'd translate it and in general. Petros kai ha apostoloi, Peter and the rest of the disciples. Okay, so it's adding the whole to a specified part. And then we have the inverse of that. It can add an especially important part to the whole. So we would translate it and especially. Kai Yuda, Kai Jerusalem. All of Judah, or all Judah, and especially Jerusalem. So it could be pointing out something particular. That's from 2 Chronicles 35:24. As another use of a marking of connections between single words, it could be a hendiadys, and here it would be translated in kind of an attributive way. Okay, so the example I have here is from Luke 2:47. They were amazed in understanding and at his answers. Literally is how it would be. They were amazed at his understanding and his answers. But we would, with that kai, would signal kind of an attributive sense to it. So instead of they were amazed at his understanding and his answers, we would translate they were amazed at his intelligent answers. And lastly, for connecting single words, is that it could coordinate two verbs, one of which should have been a participle. So really this is kind of untranslatable and kind of an odd category, I think, to be saying, well, the grammar should have been saying that. So the examples from Romans 10:20, apatolema kai lege, they're saying it should have been apatolemon lege. They're saying that it should be being bold, he says, but really the text is he was bold and he said. So that's kind of an interesting category there. So it can be it can connect single words. It can also connect clauses and sentences. This is point B. So in general, here we're going to translate this as and. Here I have Eilthon kai didaskan, and they entered and kept on teaching, Acts 5:21. And it can also connect two questions or quotations. It can connect a dialogue or alternative possibilities, not alternative facts though, right? All right, no comedy for me here today. In connecting clauses, it can function kind of like the Hebrew vav, so it would function as that. And this is particularly a Hebraism whenever it can be a connective where more discriminating usage would call for other particles. So kai here, as an example, would be replacing what we would normally expect as hati. And from Revelation 6:12, kai edon kai seismas egenata. So literally it'd be and I saw and an earthquake happened. But really what we would expect would be kai edon hati seismon egenata, and I saw that an earthquake happened. And this is also frequently used with historical narrative, and often the kai will be happening with egenata. It's kind of like the Vayahi ... and then vav again. So, and it happened that, and it came about that. We see that in the gospel narratives quite a bit. Kai can also be used within rapid successions. We would translate this and then, you know, each time. So this happens from just kind of colloquial speech from everyday life. And it's kind of like the Hebrew vav above, in that it would have to occur with egenata. So we see just the further example that I've provided there from Revelation 6:12 and following. So this joins independent clauses, parataxis, rather than subordinating them, hypotaxis. So it's a Hebraism as well, and somewhat a colloquial way to speak. Kai can also function in a time way. It can be translated when, whenever it coordinates rather than subordinates with an expression of time. So from Matthew 26:45, the time has come when he is to be given up. Literally, the time has come and he is given up. So it could be translated as when. Also from Mark 15:25, and they crucified him. Could be translated, since it's referring to a point in time, could be translated when they crucified him. Kai can also function to signal an apodosis, an if-then prodosis apodosis clause, and this is due heavily to Hebrew and BDAG notes Septuagint influence, okay? But it's not offensive. This use of Kai to signal an apodosis is not offensive to ears trained in good Greek, they note. An example of this is in Revelation 3:20. It can also be used to connect a negative clause with which then moves to an affirmative clause. So the example here from John 4:11, you have no bucket and the well is deep. So the negation doesn't carry on to the next phrase. Then you have the other scenario with this in the next use, where the negative clause moves to another negative clause connected with and. So the negation continues through the Kai. Example, Revelation 16:15. So that he might not walk naked, and so that they might not see his shame. So the may carries through with the Kai. Kai can also be used as a result, translated and then or and so. It introduces a result from the preceding clause, especially after an imperative or an imperatival expression. Example from Matthew 4:19. Dute apisomou kai poieso. Come after me, and then I will make you, fishers of men. It can be used confirmatory, and so. It will introduce a short clause that confirms the existence of something that ought to be. 1 John 3:1, that we should be called the children of God, kai esmen. And so we really are. So it's confirming, it's affirming, confirming something that ought to be in existence, or is already in existence. You can have Kai functioning as a surprising fact, and thus translated as and yet, and in spite of that, or nevertheless. It emphasizes a surprising, unexpected, or noteworthy fact. And you come to me, Kai su erke prasme, and you come to me, Matthew 3:14. It can also, very similarly to that, introduce or connect a surprising fact with an attempt involved. And here it would be translated as but, right? Zete kai uk heuriske. He searches, but he finds none. He searches literally, and he finds, and he does not find. Matthew 12:43, but we would translate it as but. Next is a contrasting response. Again, it can be translated here as but. Take it, kai apadoses moi. From the Shepherd of Hermas, says, take it and return it to me. But here we would translate it as but. Take it, but nevertheless, return it to me. It can function using an abrupt question, and we would translate it then and then with a question mark because it's part of a question. So it might introduce an abrupt question, which may often express wonder, ill will, or incredulity. So Mark 10:26, kai tis, who then? Or John 14:9, kai pos su leges, how is it then that you say? And finally, with kai connecting clauses and, clauses and sentences, it can function as a parenthesis. All right, so it doesn't really get translated, it's just a parenthesis. use parentheses instead of a chi. So Romans 1:13. But so far I have been prevented. Chi, and until now I have been prevented, but chi is just functioning as a parenthesis marker. Okay, as a connective, right? As a marker of connections, chi, thirdly, point C, can be explicative. It can be translated that is or namely. A word or clause is connected with another word or clause for the purpose of explaining what goes before it. Kai karin anti caritas in John 1:16. That is, grace upon grace. Another type of explicative could be the use of kai with a demonstrative pronoun, kai hutas, kai tuta, or kai tauta. Actually, in the New Testament, we only see kai tuta, and the other two with hutas or tauta are used in earlier forms of Greek and classical Greek and whatnot. So that's the explicative. It explains, namely, yada, yada, yada. The next use, point D, is an intensive chi. And actually, I'm here correcting BDAG's terminology. Later in BDAG, so they incorrectly call this assensive chi, translating it indeed and indeed or and that. But actually later on in this article on chi, they identify another type of intensive, and they translate it as indeed there as well. So, and the assensive chi, which we're going to talk about in the adverbial part, actually should be more correctly translated as even, not indeed. So here we're correcting BDAG, and so we're calling this the intensive chi because later on it describes it as such. So, so here's the example. Jesus Christ, kai tuton, and indeed him on the cross. Kai tuton estau romenon. So 1 Corinthians 2:12, Jesus Christ and this one on the cross. Indeed him on the cross. It's intensive. In John 5:25, the hour comes and now is. The hour, or translated in a better sense, the hour is coming, indeed it is already here. Chi can be pleonastic or redundant, and thus we don't translate it. It's not needed. And this happens especially after the word paulus in its various forms when it's before a second adjective. In the example John 20:30, pola kai alla semea. So many and other signs would be the literal rendering, but it's redundant, it's pleonastic, it's not needed. So it would, in English, we would translate it many other signs, not many and other signs, pleonastic. We are reaching the very end here of the uses of the connective chi, and we've got two left. One is that chi can signal a new development. It can be either untranslated, or we can translate it as now, or just the simple and. It can introduce something with a loose connection, John 1:19. And this is the testimony of John. And so it just gets translated, this is the testimony of John. It's kind of a new development that it's signaling, not necessarily some sort of connection that needs translated. And then lastly, chi followed by another chi can have the both and sense and can be translated as both and, although, yet, now. It can connect single expressions, whole clauses or sentences, and even contrasts. So that is chi as the marker of connections. The second use of chi is what we would probably like to call an adverbial chi. In general, it gets translated as also or likewise. It's a marker to indicate an additive relationship that is not coordinate that is not coordinate to connect clauses and sentences. Okay, so it's not connecting clauses or sentences. It's not connecting words, but rather it functions as an adverb. This use of kai then doesn't connect or coordinate, but rather modifies verbs, adverbs, adverbially. So the first very simple use would just be also, kai tain alain, and the other one also, Matthew 5:39. This is frequently used with pronouns. So we've got ka go, I also, kai su, you also, kai humes, you also, kai autos, he also. And here, point B under number 2 then is point B under the adverbial is the assensive kai. And again, this was wrongly identified by BDAG as intensive. And again, later it identifies intensive as indeed, not even. So the assensive kai gets translated as even. The assensive notes a surprising, unanticipated factor which builds intensity with an ascending, upward movement. It takes things a further step. It takes it to another level. It's climbing of stairs. The next step up, you want to think of ascending. It's going up. Ascend, ascensive. It surely does have an intensive element. We will give that to BDAG, but it does so with an ascending and surprising force. And here in a paper that I've been working on and am going to be giving here shortly on Revelation 20 verse 4, kai tos psukas ton papelekis menon, even the souls of those who have been beheaded. I think there's a very strong case that the kai before tos psukas is an assensive kai, even the souls of those who have been beheaded. I saw thrones, and people were seated on them, and judgment was given for them. And I even saw the souls of those who have been beheaded. So it's this assensive. Another example from BDAG would be 1 Corinthians 2:10. For the Spirit searches all things, even the depths of God. Not just a simple and the depths of God, but even. Sometimes it's used with a comparative. Example from Matthew 11:9. One who is even more than a prophet. Used with comparatives. All right. The next point would be a pleonastic. We already had one use of a pleonastic, so I'm differentiating that, calling this a pleonastic contrast/comparison. It can be used in contrasts or comparisons. It's translated as also, so also, thus also. In sentences denoting a contrast, kai appears in various ways, sometimes in both members of the comparison and often pleonastically. So the example, 2 Corinthians 8:11, kathaper hutos kai, just as, so also. The hutos does the work. There's no need for hutos and then kai as well. So it's pleonastic. It's not really needed. And then Matthew 6. Kai can also stand alone in the second member. So hos ... kai could be as, so also. Matthew 6:10. Another pleonastic use is in a cause and result context. It can be left untranslated, and you might want to translate it as also, possibly. It's used with expressions that introduce cause or result, and here also pleonastic to a considerable degree. Because of this, dia tuta kai, for this reason also. So it's not really needed. It can be used after an interrogative, where we would translate it at all or still. Why are they baptized at all? 1 Corinthians 15:29. Point F, it can be used as what I call relative independence. It's untranslatable here. It's used with a relative pronoun. It often gives greater independence to the following relative clause. What also was handed down to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night in which he was betrayed, took the bread. So that later clause is very independent. So this Kai can kind of signal this greater independence that's been given to it through this relative clause, that on the night that Jesus was betrayed, he took the bread, etc., etc. That liturgy in 1 Corinthians 11. And then Galatians 2, the very thing which also I was eager to do, remember the poor. So it signals a greater independence. And here is our last pleonastic use of Kai. It's untranslatable, and it happens with prepositions sometimes. It's redundant with prepositions, and the only example given is with meta or soon. And from Philippians 4, with Clement and the rest of my fellow workers. So we have meta kai Clementas, with and Clement and the rest of my fellow workers. So it's redundant. It shouldn't be translated. It's pleonastic. It can also be used with double names. Saulus ha kai Paulus, Saul, who is also called Paul. So we translate it as also. And here we are at the very last use of Kai, the 35th use of Kai right here. Point I, as it can be used with particles. And its translation then is going to be determined by what other particles are in fact being used. Okay, so you have Kai, Kaigar. It's just going to be translated for. Kaigar ... Allah. Granted that, but. Kaigar uch, or uk, that would be neither, for even, and then not. Kai ge would be intensive, indeed, and indeed. Kai followed by a de would be and also, but also. And then kai toi with a finite verb could be yet, or on the other hand. Kai toi with a genitive absolute. We have an example of that, Hebrews 4:3. And then kai toi ge or kai toi ge as separated. Kai toi ge, or then just kai toi and ge would be translated as although in John 4:2. So there you have it. That is all 35 uses of Kai, and at an advanced level we need to be recognizing some of these different uses in the New Testament, in the Septuagint, and as we do our reading through Wisdom of Solomon this week, I'm going to be pointing out some of the various uses of Kai in there. And so what I would like to just show you last, this right here is the cheat sheet, very similar to what Wallace has, again, like I've already said, that goes through all 35 different uses all on one page, okay? So it can just be kind of a handy reference for you all. So that is our grammar lesson for this week, and next up is going to be our walk through the Greek text of Wisdom of Solomon 14.